Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Nicoll-Klokstad Variety Show. Warm-up kōrero here. I was curious about the Warriors game on Friday night against the Newcastle Knights. And there's one player I was intrigued about. One player really tickled my fancy there for the Warriors, and it was the former Dragon, Jackson Ford. What do you reckon about Jackson Ford's performance as a Dragons supporter yourself?
Somehow I had a feeling that's where this was going to go. I don't know. I didn't recognize him. I haven't seen that dude before. It's not a player I've seen play for the team that I support. In flashes, definitely. Like he is a hard runner and he's quite quick. So he can but he's quick and he's strong. He's basically like, when the Warriors signed Ewan Aiken from, it was directly from the Dragons, wasn't it? And then they sort of asked him to be a ball running back rower in a weird way, where he'd been like sort of a ball running center who couldn't pass but could run quite strong, which is a little ball of muscle. Jackson Ford's like the actual version of what they asked Ewan Aiken to be. So it's a nice bit of work from the Warriors, what do you call it, recruitment. But I don't know. I'd seen bits and pieces of that version of Jackson Ford before. I'd never seen that sustained over a full game. So that's a hell of a performance. Fair play to him. I tip my hat.
Curious to see how the Jackson Ford for Ben Murdoch-Masila player swap works.
Oh, yeah, I thought about it that way.
Like, it wasn't a specific player swap, but you've got Jackson Ford starting on
yeah,
an edge for the Warriors, and then Murdoch-Masila is going to be doing something for the Dragons if they ever get on the field. Big up Nicoll-Klokstad, the niche-case.com. We are here from Aotearoa to serve up some Aotearoa sporting yarn. We just did our Patreon podcast, the cricket podcast, that is up today on Tuesday. And we've got a Kiwi NRL Spotlight podcast recorded on Monday. So we've got 2 extra podcasts on the Patreon feed at the moment. Support the Nicoll-Klokstad directly via Patreon, patreon.com/elnicoll, EL and that is the best way to support all our content that we do, the website, the podcast, the email newsletters. You can support all of that directly via Patreon. And we're doing 2 extra podcasts, Kiwi NRL Spotlight podcast every Monday. And we've got our cricketing podcast on a Tuesday, where we previewed the Blackcaps Test series against Sri Lanka, which starts on Thursday. Turn around there, which is fun. Good to see the Blackcaps back playing Test cricket in Christchurch against Sri Lanka. We dove deep into that for the Patreon whānau. So big up to all the Patreon whānau listening to this, and that is a good way to support all the Nicoll-Klokstad content. Also, shout out to the email newsletter via Substack, the niche-case.substack.com. Always got fresh bits and bobs from the Aotearoa sporting realms. Yesterday was quite a bit of a Breakers one, recapping their weekend of action. Got some stuff that just helps set our week up. We empty the notebook on the email newsletter on a Monday, sets us up for all our content coming out that week, and then we return on a Friday with just a whole lot of preview stuff for the sporting week, and these are busy times. This is the phase of the year for myself where it's cricket and league crossover, and it's a bit crazy, but you gotta flow with the go.
Yeah, that's my when the National League football is on, that's that part of the year for me is the last couple hectic months of the year where it's very like lots of stuff to do, but also lots of it's fun stuff to follow, especially when I know I can get on an angle that no one else is quite covering. So it's we work ourselves hard, but we also do good work. It's nice. It's a reward in and of itself. But the views and the clicks and the Patreon stuff are also rewards that are quite beneficial, just in brackets at the end of that phrase.
Offer some grounding with your mindfulness.
Yeah, this might almost be this one might almost be too much grounding, but quote from a Charles Kingsley poem. just like two lines taken out of context from the thing, but to tell an idea. Goes, so fleet the works of men back to their earth again, ancient and holy things fade like a dream, which is very poetic. And sort of like tells it gives you an image of just like, I don't know, the work. That's why I said it might almost be a little bit too grounding. It's like, imagine like the works of humanity kind of crumbling to the earth over the years when they start to like break down and whatever. It's passage of time and nothing is permanent kind of ideas. And I to further bulk that up, I got this from watching I was watching a movie which was the 1922 silent version of Robin Hood with old mate Douglas Fairbanks in the lead role. Don't know who directed it, I can't remember, but a film over 100 years old, and it started off with that quote, and it showed like a castle broken down, like the ruins of a castle, and then it does this like crossfade thing where instead of like showing it breaking down over the thing, it does the opposite. Like it crossfades back into when the castle was like freshly built and people living in it and part of a kingdom and whatever. It was kind of like a cool little reversal trick there, but then it also had that quote from the poem linked in, and it was like setting you up to say like, you live now, but here's a story we're going to tell you from the Middle Ages, and this is how we're going to pass back in history to get to that point, like a little framing device thing. But then also there's the added thing of I was watching this movie 100 years after it came out, and now that movie itself is like, you know, the movie itself, I would imagine has been preserved, but like the original copies of it probably burnt up in a fire or rotted away or whatever. Everyone who was in the movie is dead now. Like it's a some people probably get a bit, I don't know, the way I laid that out, I think people might get a bit bummed out by thinking about like the inevitable passage of time. I kind of find the idea of like everything being impermanent being the opposite, like quite a freeing idea, where it's like nothing lasts, so who cares? Like you're free to do whatever you want. It's a I don't know. Do you want to add anything to that, or I'm not sure how to finish the thing without swinging it back around to something a little depressing? Or
we might just let you cook with that for a couple of days, and you can come back on the niche casting and have like some sort of boiled down crux of whatever you were trying to say. Because I don't know what the that boiled down crux of mindfulness was, but there's something there. There's definitely something there. And I'll let you cook with that for a couple of days.
If you boil it down to that one word.
A lot of people don't even know what that word means. So you might just need to do a bit more. You might need to do some more learning so you can come back with some colloquial English terms and just a bit more information to share with us, because we've got to get into some Aotearoa sports here. But I do want to say you're definitely working with some fine ingredients in your mindfulness. There is something there. Like, keep your head up, come back on Thursday, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll try find something that contrasts with it for then. We'll see.
My leading banger take here at the top is that as Amy Satterthwaite bows out of cricket, Maddy Green has found a groove. I dropped a whole lot of stats in the HBJ Shield final wrap. So there's all the stats, all the facts, all the figures. Drop some of that in the Monday email newsletter as well. But there's this crossover that I think is working well for women's cricket in New Zealand. Because, of course, Amy Satterthwaite retired from the White Ferns basically a year ago. And in the White Ferns, that has coincided with Maddy Green's best years of White Ferns batting. And then in the HBJ Shield final, you had Maddy Green scoring 106 for Wellington off 106 deliveries in a final. 106 out of 258 of Wellington's runs were scored by Maddy Green in a game when Amy Satterthwaite played her last game of cricket. And Amy Satterthwaite is bowing out of domestic cricket right when Maddy Green just played an absolutely monstrous championship knock. Maddy Green was also excellent at the T20 World Cup. And for the White Ferns to stay in this spot where They're not quite as good as the best teams, but they're going to defeat weaker teams. You need 3 to 4 high-quality batters. And I think Maddy Green has stepped up into that Amy Satterthwaite slot, which it's been a long time coming. Maddy Green's had plenty of talent, but just hadn't scored many runs. Whereas now, over the last 2 years especially, she has elevated her run-scoring production, and it culminated in this absolutely fabulous knock. She was playing reverse laps. She was swatting deliveries through cover, beautiful hand-eye coordination. That was a culmination knock from Maddy Green in a championship fixture. What's your leading banger segment take?
Well, I'm absolutely compelled to tell everybody about the ongoing greatness of Charlisse Leger-Walker. Although, just quickly before I do that, are you telling me that Maddy Green turned 30 and then found her best form as a cricketer?
Yeah, funnily enough, like, for every year she wasn't over 30, she wasn't scoring many runs. So maybe like winning games of cricket is possible. Maybe you can win games of cricket with players over 30 years of age. How about that?
Particularly the White Ferns, who are extremely reliant on 4 players, now 3 players, 2 of whom are over 35 or around that age. Satterthwaite's now retired, so she doesn't get to join the group anymore. Amelia Kerr, obviously a bit younger, but is also a phenom who everyone knew from a young age was going to be a great thing, which actually contrasts quite nicely with Charlisse Leger-Walker, because I think there's a lot of I think there's actually I'm thinking of more as I'm thinking of like ways in which those 2 careers have so much in common, because there's the bursting onto the scene as a teenager and everyone's saying like, oh, this kid's special. There's the family legacies as well. There's the success, the prowess. And with Charlisse Leger-Walker, basketballer at Washington State University, the Cougars, she's just led them to the Pac-12 Division Conference, whatever you call them, championship. They had to win 4 games in the space of a week to do that. They did it. It is the school's first ever Pac-12 championship. They've never done this before. They beat higher seeded teams, I think, in every single one of their games. They came in as like the 8th seed or something like that for the tournament, and then they just kept beating better teams. It might have even been lower than the 8th seed. I'm not entirely sure. They would have been a higher seeded team had Charlisse not missed a couple games for family reasons during the season, and I think they might have actually lost all of them anyway. They beat UCLA in the final. Leger-Walker scored 23 points, made 5 3-pointers on 7 attempts. She had 7 rebounds, including a couple absolutely clutch ones right near the end, 3 assists. She was the best player on the floor. She was the player of the tournament as her team won the championship. She was just absolutely decisive in the final itself. She actually improved her season scoring average slightly at the conference championships there. And because they won, they would have been selected anyway, but they're now automatically and are going to get a better seed for it. The national tournament, the old March Madness that's coming up soon, it'll be the school's, WSU's 3rd national tournament appearance in a row, and Charlisse Leger-Walker's 3rd year at the school, having only ever made it once to the national tournament in their history before. And the next big what do you call it, milestone is to actually win a game there. They're going to get a pretty decent chance to be able to do that in a couple of weeks. We're quite used to like the Stephen Adams, Mika Vakona style basketballing export from New Zealand, where it's like the player who isn't the elite superstar on the team, but they do everything, all the little things so well. They don't cut corners. They facilitate and make everyone else better around them. Charlisse Leger-Walker has some of that, but she's not, like, the difference there is she's not the facilitator. She's not the one helping the stars. She is the star. Like, she is the best. She is one of the best players in college basketball right now. Like, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that she is going to play in the WNBA. And as it stands, Megan Campaign is the only New Zealander to ever play in the WNBA. And that was about 25 years ago when she did that. nothing since. Charlisse Leger-Walker, like players who have done what she has achieved already, and she's still got one more year of college to follow after this one. Players who have done comparable things to what she's done. Not only did they pretty much all go on to play WNBA, but they all got pretty high draft picks as well. Like they're not just creeping in the back door of the WNBA. They're going like spotlights on them. You know, big teams looking to select them. I don't know, man. I don't know what else to say. These are legendary Kiwi sporting activities that are unfolding right before our very eyes. Charlisse Leger-Walker is doing just absolutely special things and showing no sign of stopping whatsoever either.
Let's get statistical, and I'm going to offer a Roger Tuivasa-Sheck light stat line from Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad. 19 runs, 204 meters, 10.73 meters per run, 3 tackle busts, 1 dummy half run for 10 meters. Love to see that. 2 offloads, 10 tackles, couple of try-saving situations, 1 error, not many errors, pretty safe. Not only was it a light version of a Roger Tuivasa-Sheck stat line, it was all very similar to Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. And I think Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad is a winning fullback with a very underrated running game, because he always gets between defenders, and that's evident in his running efficiency. And we'll track that. We'll see how that progresses over the course of the season. What's your stat? I always try to get 1 stat out of you, but you got to dish up like 20, and here you go again.
I like the chain of stats. So one stat leads to another, and you just chuck them all out there. This is, well, I wrote a big old piece about the Blackcaps, specifically looking at the stats and stuff from the Blackcaps 1-run win over England. And so I just picked out my three favorite little aspects of that. The first one being that there have been almost 2,500 test matches in history, and only 4 of them have involved a team winning after following on. And there've only been 2 1-run wins, also 2 tied test matches, which is even closer, but it's not a winning margin, so it's not by 1 run in history. Both of these things happened with the Blackcaps in this test match, which, as far as I'm concerned, makes this the most unlikely result in the history of test cricket. Point number 2 is the Blackcaps, despite how would we refer to this, reports of their impending demise and such like this, despite that, Blackcaps undefeated in their last 11 straight home series. It felt like that whole trend had disappeared when they lost their unbeaten streak. I think it was 17 games unbeaten until Bangladesh won. But they did hit back and beat Bangladesh in the next game to tie that series. They tied the series against South Africa following that. They've tied the series against England after getting absolutely smoked in the first game. 11 straight home test series. I think they won 8 in a row, and then they've drawn 3 since. So there's been a drop off, but they're still undefeated at home since 2017 when South Africa came here. They were the last team to win a test series in Aotearoa. And then the last point is just some stuff on Kane Williamson. I found it very interesting to note that Kane Williamson averages 78.33 when the Blackcaps win. He averages 64.9 when the Blackcaps draw. And he averages 25.3 when the Blackcaps lose. A lot of players have similar things, because obviously the stats just reflect the performance, and the performances reflect the results. So it's like it's a connected thing, that if the Blackcaps win, obviously someone scored some runs, and it's usually Kane Williamson. So that makes sense. But the 53-run difference between wins and losses is quite extreme in terms of Kane Williamson's average. The split in terms of hundreds distributions is 16 in wins, 8 in draws, and 2 in defeats, and that's with an equal 62 innings in wins, same as in losses. The same amount of innings in those things, and that amount of differential sort of suggests that Kane Williamson's basically, there is some chicken and egg thing potentially here, but I think with Williamson, it's safer to say when Williamson does well, the Blackcaps do well. When Williamson doesn't do well, the Blackcaps struggle. Like, he's very much a barometer for this team. And also, since people have had this idea that Williamson has been out of form for a while, I propose another theory. I'm throwing this one out in contrast to that. I'm going to say that Williamson just hates facing Broad and Anderson. And Jimmy Anderson has gotten him out 9 times, the most of any bowler in Test cricket. Stuart Broad has gotten him out 6 times, the most is the second most of any bowler in Test cricket, and Stuart Broad's done that an average of 14 against Williamson as well since the pandemic. So since what's that, March 2020, whenever it was. Since then, the Blackcaps have played England on 7 occasions, which is a lot of Test matches against England on 3 separate tours. Kane Williamson hasn't played all of those, but he's played enough to average 25.2 from 10 innings against England across that span of things. And that's including the 132 he scored in Wellington in the most recent innings, which more than doubled the runs he'd scored in the 9 innings combined before that, in which he didn't pass 50 in any of them. Well, in the same passage of time, against everyone who's not England, every other Test nation in the world, he scored, this is just the sequence of his scores in that time. I'm not cutting anything out. This is all the scores against every non-English Test playing nation since the pandemic: 251, 129, 21, 238, 49, 52 not out, 18, 24, 200 not out, 36, 41, and there you go. That's 159 runs at an average of 117.67. Was he out of form, or does he just not like playing against England, a team in which he has his lowest opponent average against of 36.85? I don't know. I think maybe Kane Williamson's actually been scoring runs this whole time and just not against England. It just seems that might just be his bogey team. Other than that, I don't know. An average of 117 seems pretty decent.
We are going to combine forces and get deep into the mangroves, where we've got New Zealand Breakers playing NBL Finals against Sydney Kings. This series is chilling out for a couple of days. They're back on a Friday-Sunday cycle after the Friday-Sunday cycle over the weekend. Breakers won the first game in Sydney, then lost the second game in Auckland. And my first point to you, Wildcard, is even though the Breakers were never really going to win the second game coming like late into the game, it felt like they were in the contest. And they had been thoroughly outplayed in the second game in Auckland. But right up until like the final minute, it felt like they were in the contest. Did you get that vibe as well?
Yeah, I did. It felt like they were a run away from surging in front. Like they scored 9 points in the first quarter. It was quite bad for long stretches there, especially the end of the quarter when Sydney started scoring and the Breakers didn't. Like at the start, just no one was scoring. But then they closed it up, so I think they're only 4 points down at halftime. Like they had a run there. They hauled them right back, and then they just had a terrible start to the third quarter. And then while they tried to haul them back in the fourth, it was a bit too much. But yeah, I think there for sure there was stretches across a couple different times in that game where they got close and just needed to kick on a little bit more and didn't. So there's a lot to take from that. I would suggest throwing it back as a. Oh, should we do Will McDowell-White first, or should we talk about maybe some of the adjustments between game on game? Might be a little bit more of a flow.
What was, because I think you're further in the basketball mangroves than myself. I'm just kind of kayaking down the estuary here. What did you see in McDowell-White's first game? Because there was a massive difference between his performance in the first game. If you want to go plus minuses, he was a 9 in the first game. He was a -6 in the second game, which comes from 6 turnovers, more turnovers than assists. Didn't really do anything shooting wise, whereas in the first game he was shooting everything. He made a 3-pointer, shot 5 out of 7 2-pointers. So he was doing a lot of good stuff. Obviously, he runs the whole attacking motion with the pick and roll and all that good stuff. Was there anything in his performance that, like, obviously everything changed because he wasn't as good, but was that like something Sydney hadn't done? Was it just a bad game from McDowell-White? How did you interpret the two extremes of McDowell-White over the weekend?
I I don't know. It might just be like a flow on of the team around him wasn't as good and therefore he struggled, or it might be a thing of he was struggling and therefore the team wasn't like that chicken and egg thing again, like same as with Williamson and the Blackcaps performances. But I did see a few people suggesting after the first game that the way Sydney defended the pick and roll was not good. Like they're sort of dropping off and either letting him sort of just letting him do whatever he wanted. And I think a couple of things on that is like the most notable, like he dropped from, I think he had 19, 9, and 9 in the first game, shooting better than 50%. Like the 19 points is awesome. He dropped to 7 points or something, shooting well under 50% in the second game. But I think the turnovers is the main point. Obviously, there's a drop in assists as well from 9 to 4, 3 or 4. I think he had in the second game. That's also less than ideal, but I think that's a bit more of like, some guys were missing shots as well. It wasn't just that he wasn't making passes, but the turnovers was a big problem because he had no turnovers in the first game. Flawless. Like it's zero turnovers, 19 points on better than 50% shooting, 9 assists, 9 rebounds, no turnovers in an NBL finals game. Like that's as good as you can hope a local point guard to be. Like if you got a American endpoint point guard, you might have some slightly higher scoring expectations, but for a local dude, that's outstanding, and it led to a victory. The 6 turnovers in the second game, that was a big deal, and I don't know. It's maybe beyond my basketballing pay grade to say why, but definitely Sydney made big adjustments from the first game to the second game, and Will McDowell-White was one of the dudes who suffered, and I think it's on Mody Maor and his team to sort of find out the reverse adjustments to get back to what they did well in game one. I don't think Sydney are going to let them have some of that stuff that they had in the same way, but I will say McDowell-White seems like he's a pretty good, and it's probably often the case with point guards, to be fair, since they do run the offense, but he seems like a pretty good barometer player. Like if he does well, if he has a positive impact on the game, Breakers are probably going to have a positive performance. If he doesn't, then I don't know, things might slide a little bit because you lose a lot of control in the way that they play, particularly in the half court stuff.
Will McDowell, he is the Kane Williamson of the Breakers. Shout out to him. That's a big.
I guess so. He's not averaging 117, but I might say more Neil Wagner in very different molds of very different ways in which they go about it. But I think Wagner is also someone who's much better in the victories than he is in defeats, like another one who has a big swing.
The other thing that I was curious about, obviously big up Xavier Cooks, future NBA star and former NZ NBL MVP.
Both NBL MVP as well. He did both in a row.
Fucking double. It was a weird weekend because obviously the home away splits was a bit funky, but the Breakers beat Sydney with Cooks in the team playing a lot of minutes, and then in Auckland on Sunday, Cooks didn't play much because he had some corks or some sort of injury. Also, shout out, I like having the Aussie dude on the coverage and the joint kind of coverage there with the regular Sky Sport Breakers coverage. And I also spotted that for the Super Rugby Magic Round type of thing. It was like an amalgamation of New Zealand commentators, knock my mic over, and the Aussie ones. So it was quite fun. I just want to shout them out, bit of commentary chat there. But Cooks didn't play much in the second game, but the Sydney team still got a lot of good mahi out of their big men, and they seem to have a lot of big men. You got Suarez, Noi was quite good. Who's the other one? Hunter. Hunter was quite good. So they've got this like endless crop of big men, and Cooks, who's just off to the NBA pretty soon. How do you see the Breakers and Mody Maor kind of managing those big men matchups, considering Brantley and Pardon? Excellent. Love them. Massive fans of them. It's a bit interesting when Tommy Vodanovic isn't playing as many minutes and you've got Rob Lowe there, who offers a funky threat and unique skill set himself.
Yeah, there's options there that the Breakers have. The worry is that, it's a worry that you had throughout the regular season watching this team, is that as good as they are defensively, a lot of that comes from being quite aggressive. And there will be games where that aggression is just refereed slightly stricter, or maybe you're on the wrong side of the line yourself. Like you get a bit too aggressive, you get carried away. It's a finals game after all. You want to put an extra effort. The foul counts were big disparity, especially early on in that game as Sydney established their lead. And I don't think that was one of the, like, I hear this from Warriors fans in various sports as well. It's a similar thing where it's like, the penalty count is so far against us. It's the refs are picking on us. It's you can't be a Kiwi team and an Aussie can't, blah blah blah. Sort of, but sometimes penalty counts and foul counts are disparative because the game is disparate. Like one team's being way more aggressive and making it a point of attacking the rim, and you're defending it hard, but you're getting caught. Like you're just giving away more penalties. You're giving away more fouls. Maybe that's the reason. I felt like there are a couple of soft ones, to be honest, but that's always going to be the case. If you put the refs in a position to make more calls by attacking the rim, you will get more calls in your favor. That's how it worked with the Kings. And they did go to their big dudes, and that didn't include Cooks. And that's a really funky aspect of how the series goes across the last 3 games, potentially 3 games, at least 2 more. Because I think maybe, I don't know. Cooks was clearly injured in game 1 because he was not himself. He wasn't performing that well. And I think that's probably a reason why they were more willing to keep him out, is because, well, he didn't actually impact winning in a way in the first game either. So maybe we just sit him down and make sure he's right for the next one. Knowing we got like a 5-day break or whatever to get him ready for 4 off days. But they've got an NBA ready big man ready to come back in and have a like MVP of the league to come back in and impact the rest of the series. So that's the worry. But honestly, from the Breakers, you just gotta foul less. It seems like a simple thing to say, and it might not always be in their control, but you gotta not rack up that foul pressure, because then you suddenly can't be so aggressive because you're worried about getting that 5th foul and having to sit down or whatever. Like it's just as simple, I think, for them as this might be an area we can't fully compete, but there are other areas we know we can. So we just got to minimize the damage and just make sure we don't have to worry about being less aggressive because of the fouls. Like I think that's the best you can do in that scenario. But as someone like Tom Vodanovic is someone who could come in and just like play some hard ass minutes, knowing it doesn't matter if he fouls out because he's a guy lower on the thing, and he can still shoot a 3-pointer here and there. So you never know.
Question time, and it was a big matchup for Aotearoa and Newcastle. Unfortunately, the Warriors SG ball team did lose to the Newcastle Knights, so they couldn't do the treble against the Knights. New South Wales Cup defeated Newcastle. NRL team defeated Newcastle. Wellington Phoenix defeated Newcastle as well. So I'm going to ask you, and then you're going to ask me the same thing. You don't actually have to ask me, but we might set it up that way. What was a point of optimism and a point of reservation from the Wellington Phoenix defeating Newcastle this weekend?
Well, a point of optimism is that they won ugly. I think the funny thing is the Phoenix women didn't play against Newcastle, or else would have been able to lump them into this thing. They played against Brisbane. They actually played quite well. I thought it was one of their best performances. They just couldn't quite convert the chances and then conceded a sloppy one near the end. Like a goal that always felt like it might have been coming from Brisbane. They had pace up front, and that was definitely an issue. But the Phoenix women played quite well and drew. The Phoenix men didn't play that well, and they won. So I think that sounds like a criticism, but we've seen them play well and not win. So I think it's very good to see them winning ugly. It's just get those points however you can get them. And if it comes ugly, okay, but you can play better. And if you're winning on the bad days, you can win on the good days too. Point of reservation, I think one of the reasons they were a bit ugly is because they've had a lot of changes on their back 4 recently, and like Sam Sutton misses with a muscle injury for this one, so Moragas comes back in, Elliott's back from suspension, so Payne plays centre back, Laws drops out, Wooden's only just, I think, a second start back from injury. A lot of these changes are not having a great effect on how they're defending, and there's been some sloppy goals they've conceded, and they got away with a few against Newcastle. I'm not going to lie there. Like Ollie Sale was one of his good games, so that was nice, but he's been unusually inconsistent this season, and I think that's probably got a bit to do with it, is having a defensive line shuffling. We have not had a starting four yet of Elliott, Payne, Sutton, Wootton. I don't think there's been an instance, or there might have only been one game in which those four started, the ideal back four. And I will just say the main point of reservation is I don't think Scott Wooden's looked very good since he's come back from injury. And hopefully that's just a matter of getting his sea legs again. And that's, he missed some time, he's building back up. But as a point of reservation. So I'll flip it back to you now. Warriors, optimism, reservation, where we at?
Optimism is their energy. Everyone, people were energetic to put a shot on. Dylan Walker took a hit up off a kickoff. The small bloke ran it straight off the kickoff. Didn't actually run it straight. He kind of had a little curve in his run, but that's all good. No dramas. And a lot of the defensive plays just come from a bit more energy in their covering defense and support plays. Blokes are there popping up in support, full of energy. And it was a vibrant Warriors team. They were running hard, they were tackling hard, they were showing up for each other, and that's kind of all you want to see. And it was good that Andrew Webster could instill that in them for the first game against a pretty average Newcastle Knights team. My point of reservation is going to be consistent all season. They're just trying to crack the top 8. That's it. Just trying to crack the top 8. We're not even thinking about anything further. We just want to see a Warriors team hit the finals and see what happens. That's it. Nothing more. Hopefully nothing less, but the Warriors don't win wooden spoons, so you don't need to worry about that. Not going to happen. Musical jam, just want to highlight, we've got a new Soaked Oats. Got to say that properly. Soaked Oats. That is from Aotearoa. Love a bit of Soaked Oats. And also found a new track from Mayhem Loren with Madlib and DJ Muggs. That's a combination I do love to see. Yourself?
New tune from Vera Ellen. Speaking of the Kiwi tunes, I think the second single off her upcoming album, which should be a banger. I'm pretty sure I had her last album as one of my top 10 of the year a couple of years ago. Other than that, Death Valley Girls got a new album. Lucero got a new album. And then I finally got around to listening to the Ty Segall project called the CIA album called Surgery Channel, which is him and his wife and Emmett Kelly from a band called Cairo Death Gang, which is awesome. The first one was quite sort of experimental in a way that it didn't always suit. This one, they've just got tunes to go with the vibe. So it's that one's a banger. And then also him and Emmett Kelly have done like a live release thing as well that I haven't heard yet, but I shall, because I listen to everything Ty Segall does, because he's a god amongst men, that fellow. When he picks up a guitar or the drum kits, or he just stands at a mic, he can do all of these things.
Is he the Kane Williamson of music?
He's the Kane Williamson of the San Francisco rock scene, that's for sure. Or why to LA now? He doesn't live in San Fran anymore.
I was going to say, that's a bit too niche. Like, Kane Williamson's a big Donny. He's far-reaching. He's not just some niche musician.
Williamson is like Beyonce or something, Yeah, we're in different... There's levels here. He's beyond.
Big up yourself. Thank you for listening to the Variety Show. Make yourself seen and heard. Big up, big up. Shout out Aotearoa. We'll be back on Thursday with an episode of the Niche Cast. Stay beautiful. Cha-cha.